Outburst, a Todd Mills mystery. Book 4. Author, R.D. Zimmerman. Publisher, Scribble Pub. Minneapolis, Minnesota, 1998. Narrator, Eric Aust. Chapter 20. It was enough to make Todd nauseous, but Rollins took it in professional stride and told him not to worry. They met at the curb, right outside City Hall, and when Todd passed him the note, which he had handled as little as possible, Rollins slipped it directly into a plastic bag, with the hope that they could recover a fingerprint. Rollins said he was going right down to forensics. Speechless, Todd then watched as Rollins disappeared back into the massive granite building, finding solace only in the fact that Rollins was, for the time being at least, safely ensconced behind the brutally thick walls of the city's heart. When Todd finally got to the station shortly before noon, it was clear that the story of Sergeant Forrest's murder was going to sink to the number 2 spot on the midday news. Todd, however, couldn't have cared less. Going directly to his office, he shut his door and sat there, his mind racing for a way to defuse this, hoping that Forrest's killer would phone. He took virtually every one of his calls, letting none slip into voicemail. Then again, undoubtedly, the man who had gunned down Mark Forrest and taken a shot at Rollins suspected that Todd's home and work phones were tapped, as they most definitely had been since 8 that morning. Under the police advice, namely Rollins, any call coming into Todd's office or his cellular phone was immediately traced. Not wanting to lose anything, Todd took it one step further and had a small tape recorder on hand virtually all afternoon. Anytime either of his phones rang, the first thing he did was slap the small suction cup with the microphone onto the receiver. That's cool. Very cool, said Nan, the producer, loving the idea. Get me a recording of a cop's killer's voice. And no problem. I'll make sure you lead them all, the 5, 6, and 10 o'clock. But no such call came. As it was, Todd busied himself the rest of the day getting as much information as possible about Mark Forrest. First, he called Q Monthly and requested the back issue on gay cops, which they said they'd dig out. Following that, he spoke with a public relations person at the Minneapolis Park Police. Then with Lieutenant Adams, Forrest's superior, and finally with 2 other police officers who had worked side by side with Forrest and could vouch for his character. Simply, everyone gushed about what a great guy he'd been and how terrible this was, the shooting. By all accounts, Park Police Officer Mark Forrest was beloved, a farm boy who worked hard, was without question totally honest, and who got along with everyone. He had no temper, not that anyone knew of, and he'd never been reprimanded, not by any means. And that he was gay was almost beside the point, and no one knew if Mark had been dating anyone. Least of all, some guy with brown hair. Todd jotted it all down, and it all fit. What everyone said about Mark Forrest matched Todd's initial impressions of the handsome young man. Todd had met briefly on the Stone Arch Bridge. Knowing nothing of Forrest's family, Todd had no choice but to be obnoxiously aggressive. He found out where Forrest's mother and father lived, and while all of his instincts told him he should just grab a photographer and head out there, he was reticent to leave the station in case a call came in from the self-identified killer. Instead, he sent Bradley to the farm just outside of Faribault, and he got some footage of the grieving mother and father as they climbed in a car and hurried away. At the end of the day, unfortunately, Todd had learned nothing new, at least not of any real significance, and he found himself fixated on when Forrest's killer might next emerge and what he would do. Unbelievable, thought Todd, cursing himself for the 100th time. He'd been standing right up there on that porch, and that jerk had slithered right on by. A mere 40 minutes before the 5 p.m. news, a gas main ruptured in northeast Minneapolis, the explosion ripping open a street. And while no one was killed, a half-dozen people, including 2 kids on bikes, were injured. No doubt about it, it made for very dramatic coverage, and a reporter and photographer rushed to the scene. The 5 p.m. news opened with live shots of ambulances screaming down the street, steaming pavement, a 10-foot deep crater, and among other things, a bent bike. The good news, concluded the evening anchor, Tom Rivers, with his perfectly great broadcaster's voice, is that at this point, none of the injuries appear serious or life-threatening. At the back of Studio A, Todd was given the cue, and he slipped past the news director, who sat at a bank of computers directing the robotic cameras. Moving toward the news set, Todd stepped over the cables, past the floor director, then took his position at a desk some 15 feet to the right of Tom Rivers. We'll be having updates throughout this broadcast, continued Rivers. One of our reporters is now on the way to Hennepin County Medical Center, so we'll keep you posted on the status of those injured. Todd, tonight wearing a navy blue sport coat, light blue shirt, and a solid blue tie, sat down, slipped in his earpiece, and straightened his tie. A mother-like voice squawked in his ear. "Smoothen the front of your hair, Todd." He did as he was told and stared straight into the monitor. "Good," Nan said approvingly. Todd glanced over at Tom Rivers, saw the anchor, looked down at his sheaf of papers, that was nothing more than a prompt, and then looked up at the teleprompter. "Okay," thought Todd, "here goes." Staring at the monitor, Rivers read, "Meanwhile, the murder of Minneapolis Park Police Officer Mark Forrest, who was gunned down 2 days ago on the Stone Arch Bridge in downtown Minneapolis, continues to occupy the full attention of the Minneapolis Police Force. Here to give us an update is WLAK's investigative reporter Todd Mills, who in fact witnessed the brutal slaying." "Tossing it," he said. "Todd." The floor director cued Todd, pointing to him just as a light atop the robotic camera flashed red. "As of this moment, police continue to search for a suspect in the shooting," began Todd, trying to make things sound interesting, but knowing all too well the only real news was that Officer Mark Forrest was still dead. He then launched into a very brief recap of the story, using part of the Stone Arch Bridge package and explaining how it was not until the following day that Forrest's body was actually found. As a clip of the family farm outside Faribault played, Todd continued, telling how Mark Forrest had left behind 2 very devoted parents, and then he reported again on the strange phone call he'd received last night from the man who claimed to be the true killer. "Certainly," said Todd, "that was one of the stranger twists in this story." In the lobby of the WLAK station, Renee Rogers sat at the main switchboard, thumbing through the latest issue of McCall's in her late 50s. She had pale skin that was very finely etched with wrinkles, professionally dyed auburn hair, and she wore a gray pantsuit with a pink blouse. Having worked at WLAK for nearly 17 years, she knew this was both the easiest and longest part of the day. By and large, the phones quit ringing right before 5, yet she had to sit there until 6. Things could be worse, she thought, steadying the carefully placed telephone headset as her head tilted back with a big yawn. The lobby of Channel 10 was an expansive 2-story space, recently redone. The walls painted a slick silver, the floor covered with red carpeting. Renee found it cold and stark, though of course no one asked her, and of course she told no one, for she prided herself on knowing her place. If, and granted she knew that was a big if, someone ever asked, however. Among other things, she didn't like the 4 white leather couches surrounding the glass coffee table in the middle of the waiting room, and she really didn't like the shiny black laminated surface of her station. Kind of tacky, not to mention that it showed each and every fingerprint. On the other hand, the video wall, a collection of a dozen screens, synchronized to show one image, that of WLAK's continuous broadcast, was rather amazing. The only disadvantage was that she had a tendency to watch what was up there, and it made it hard for her to do her work, especially when the soaps were on. Good thing, at least, that the volume was always kept next to nothing. Glancing up from a recipe claiming to be the world's best non-fat lemon poppy seed pound cake, she saw the larger-than-life image of Todd Mills filling the screen. She squinted, handsome and nice, always in a rush, though. Hard to believe he was gay. Certainly didn't look it, or as her 20-year-old niece said, "Oh, for cute, but what a waste, you know?" The board in front of her started ringing, and Renee punched a button and said into her headset, "Good afternoon, WLAK, Channel 10. How may I direct your call?" The faint voice on the other end asked, "Would you please write this down?" Renee's brow wrinkled. "This is WLAK. How may I direct your call?" "Just write this down, if you'd be so kind." "I'm sorry, Please," said the caller, his voice nervous, even breathless. "I know this is Channel 10. That's who I'm calling. I just need you to do something for me, all right?" Renee had them all. Every type of caller, from the First Lady's personal secretary to a neo-Nazi with a bomb threat. Grace, she thought, that's what you're hired for. You're the first voice of WLAK, and above and beyond everything you have to be polite. Fortunately, that's what she was. Yet another native Minnesotan who, no matter what, could always force herself to sound natural and completely unruffled. "Is there someone you'd like to speak with?" asked Renee, glancing up at the video wall as Todd Mills continued his report. "I'd just like you to pass on a message. I want you to write it down." "A message? Okay," Renee thought. "And now we're getting somewhere." A lot of people just wanted to talk, or more precisely, to rant and rave about something WLAK did. Others wanted to leave a message, but didn't want to get dumped into voicemail. And she couldn't say she blamed them either. Technology just kept getting more impersonal by the day, and she, for one, hated it. "Yes, of course," said Renee. "Who is this for?" "Write this down. 555 RBG. Whoever this nut was, she thought, he certainly couldn't listen very well. Nevertheless, Renee did exactly as she was instructed. "Read that back to me," demanded the caller. Good Lord, thought Renee. The nerve. If this person had called even 20 minutes ago, Renee wouldn't have had the time for these kinds of shenanigans. Eager to be done with it, though, Renee did as commanded. 555 RBG. "Yes, exactly," said the caller. "Now you give that to your reporter, to Todd Mills. Tell him that's the car I saw driving away the other night. The night that poor young policeman was killed." "Oh!" gasped Renee, realizing that this was about and just what she had to do. Just wait 1 minute while You don't understand. I can't get involved." There was a click on the other end as the man hung up. Todd came out of Studio A, gently shutting the door behind him as the news continued live, and she was there, the woman from the front desk, the receptionist. What was her name? And as soon as he saw her standing in the corridor, her eyes moving anxiously about the headset, still perched in her hair with its cord dangling nearly to her knees, his gut clutched. Say now, Mr. Mills, I called just... Oh, Jesus, did I miss him?" "What?" She glanced down at the paper in her hand, then up. "Well," desperate, Todd demanded, "who was it?" "A man. I don't know his name. He didn't say. He didn't want to get involved. No, actually, he said he couldn't get involved. Whatever that means. Anyway, he just wanted me to give you this." A piece of paper was thrust at Todd, which he took. "What is this? What?" "A license plate number," said the receptionist nervously. That's what he said, anyway." "What do you mean?" "Oh, the caller, the man on the phone. It was a tip caller, and he said he saw a strange car the other night. You know, the night the policeman was killed, down by the river. That's the license plate number." "Oh, my God." I tried to keep on the line, but this could be it, the break they needed, and Todd started to dash off. "Thanks." "Sure, you bet. Just doing my job." As he hurried away, Todd couldn't believe it. This good luck. Who knew what this might prove to be? But what if this was it? The killer's car. And what if, by the grace of God, they were able to catch him before he struck again? He stopped, called to the woman walking down the hall, saying, "Wait!" But what was her name? The receptionist stopped, turned around, clutching the cord dangling from her headset. "Renee. That's me, Renee." "Yes, of course. Did the caller say anything else? Anything else at all?" No, not really. He just told me to write that number down and give it to you, that's all." "But you're sure it was a man?" "Well, I certainly think so. It sure sounded like a man. Anyway, I'm sorry. I couldn't get more information. He just kind of hung up on me. This is great. This is wonderful. Thank you very much, Renee. You bet. With that, he took off, darting down the narrow hall, around the corner, then into the newsroom, that expansive space filled with a mass of cubicles, looking at the piece of paper in hand as he headed toward his office. He thought back. Yes, this certainly looked like a Minnesota license plate. It had the appropriate sequence of numbers and letters anyway. Now it was just a matter of getting an ID on the plates, which Todd knew would be no problem. Hurrying into his office, he stopped in the doorway, looked back toward the raised platform of the assignment editor. Just to the side of that, on the monitor that was always going, he saw Michelle Newton, their weather forecaster, coming on. Good. That meant it was 1:15. He had slightly more than 45 minutes before he was due back on for the 6 o'clock. Todd shut the glass door to his office and dropped himself into his padded desk chair in front of his computer. He hit a couple of keys on the keyboard. The color screen came to life, but no, there were no messages. He quickly checked both his desk and cell phone, but likewise found nothing. Todd then laid the piece of paper on top of the keyboard and stared at it. Okay, just take this a step at a time, he told himself. This could be nothing at all, just a wild goose chase. Forgetting entirely about what might be best for WLAK, Todd dialed a number, got a beeper, and then entered his work number. Less than 10 seconds later, his desk phone rang and Todd snatched it up. Todd Mills? Hey there. What's up? Rollins paused and added, Forensics couldn't get a single print but yours off that paper. Where are you? Down at CID. Good, replied Todd, relieved that Rollins was still down at the Criminal Investigation Division at City Hall and out of harm's way. Listen, something's up. That guy didn't call. The supposed killer. Yeah, well, but someone else did. What? A tip call came in while I was on the air. A man. He said he saw a car the night Forrest was killed. No shit. Tell me he got a license plate number. He did. He got one. Fabulous. What is it? I'll look it up on CAPRS right now, he said, referring to the computer-assisted police report system. Great. And Todd read it off. Sounds like a Minnesota plate, don't you think? Absolutely. Unable to hide the excitement in his voice, Rollins said, Just stay right there, Todd. Don't go anywhere. I'll call you right back. Let's hope this is the break we've been waiting for. Todd hung up and envisioned Rollins turning around in his two-person cubicle and using the computer he shared with his partner, Neil Foster. Glancing at his watch, Todd thought that maybe he wouldn't be heading into the studio at 6 after all. With any luck, this might turn into that kind of tip, the super hot kind that required immediate action. But if not, Todd rolled his chair away from his desk and leaned back, closing his eyes, thinking, Christ, for Rollins and Rollins' safety alone, they needed to nail this guy ASAP. If this tip didn't go anywhere, however, Todd would have to go on at 6, but perhaps not at 10, and then tomorrow? Perhaps he'd go to the park police and try to interview someone there. He'd also make another more concerted effort to interview Mark Forrest's parents. But should he push to see if the supposedly wonderful Forrest had something else lurking somewhere in his closet? Could he have been involved in any fringe groups involving leather or drugs? Todd didn't relish going down that path, not by any means. The last thing he wanted was to use the underside of the gay world to play off straight stereotypes. But why, he found himself pondering once again, had Todd been drawn into this in the first place? Why had he been lured that night to the Stone Arch Bridge? Was it because of all the reporters in the Twin Cities? Todd was the most wonderful and competent? Or was it much more simple? Was it because Todd was gay and the entire metro area knew it? Todd hated to boil everything down to sexuality, particularly his, but he couldn't help but suspect the later. Yes, as much as he didn't want to, Mark Forrest's sex life was an avenue Todd was going to have to explore. He stared at the phone and thought, ring! As if on command, it did just that. Cried to be answered. Todd all but leapt forward. Grabbing the receiver on the first ring, he blurted out, Yeah! Bingo! Said Rollins. The car, a 1968 Oldsmobile 98, was registered 3 months ago by a guy named Christopher Kinney, age 24, blonde hair, blue eyes. What's the name again? Christopher Kinney. He jotted it down, then asked, how tall? 5'7", weight 120. It could be him. The image of the slight figure in the storm moved through Todd's mind. It could be our guy. Wait, there's more. You know where he lives? South Minneapolis. Can you believe it? He lives at 5241 Turner South. Todd's mind skipped along, then slammed to a halt. What did this mean? That they'd known each other? My God, Rollins. That's only something like 10 or 12 blocks from where Forrest lived. I know. And get this, it's a re-register. Until 3 months ago, this guy had California plates. California? Right. But wait, here's the best part. When I got his plate number, I looked him up on the NCIC. Said a smug Rollins, referring to the computerized national crime records. And you know what? Oh my God, he's got a record? No shit, he's got a record, like a major league one. Just over a year ago, the Los Angeles Police Department arrested and charged him with the murder of an officer by the name of Dave Revelle. A cop? Yep. Holy shit. Eventually, those charges were dropped, but... Hey, said Todd, flipping back into work mode and writing all this down. We're going to do this just the way we talked about, right? Absolutely. You know, that's what I've wanted all along. Point taken, thought Todd. It was he, Todd, who had screwed up before. He who had been the control freak. And Lieutenant Hallberg won't have a problem with it? He might, but that's my problem. I'll deal with it. Guessing what the next step would be, Todd asked. So are you going to get a warrant? No. We'd have to formally charge him to get a warrant, but I've already talked to Lieutenant Hallberg, and since this involves a cop killing, he wants me to go over and talk with this guy right away. Unless I absolutely have to, though, he doesn't even want me doing a PC pickup. Not just yet, anyway. Too bad a probable cause pickup would definitely give Todd some excellent footage. Nevertheless, his pulse began to quicken. There could still be some great stuff here, and he glanced at his watch, wondered how quickly they could make this happen. Was there a chance in hell he could get something on the 6 o'clock? He quickly ran through a laundry list of equipment and people he'd need. Yes, it was doable. It was going to be a scramble, no doubt about it, but they could pull it off. Wanting to make sure he wasn't the one cut off, Todd said, it's going to take me about 5-10 minutes to get out of here. So when are we going to meet? And where? How about 20 minutes at Lindell and 52nd? Great. Oh, and Todd, said Rollins, the NCIC says this guy frequently wears a disguise. What do you mean? I'm not positive, but it sure as hell sounds like he's a drag queen. Gay Mysteries audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold. To offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides. And in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.